Great. So today, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Juliette McMillan. She's an associate professor at University of California, Riverside, and she has over a decade of work related to Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders. She's the author of the Native Hawaiian Healthy Ancestor book, and she's also been working on several other research projects looking at the anthropological, cultural aspects of looking at diet, nutrition, lifestyle, and Native Hawaiians on island and off island. And I'm sure she can speak to a lot more on her work as well. So it's really an honor and a pleasure to have her working with us today and giving her time for the lecture today. So, great. So we are going to be talking about, this is our, we actually did a study looking at dietary attitudes and beliefs in Native Hawaiians. There's a lot of data looking at Native Hawaiians in Hawaii, but there's sparsity in terms of looking at Native Hawaiians in Southern California. And we'll show you a little bit about the population data. You can see why that actually is something that is a need that needs to be met. So just wanted to, our first slide I wanted to point out here is that Dr. McMillan, and then we also worked on this with Ka'ala and Kauai, Victor Payne, and Charlene Kasner, and Momi Bone, who are from Idaho, which is another club that's here in Southern California. Do you want to add to that, Julia?
I just wanted to add, thank you for having me, by the way, that Pacific Islanders in the United States, or particular in California, just recently, as of 2008, have now surpassed the number of Pacific Islanders in Hawaii. So Hawaii used to have all the Pacific Islanders, and now we have more Pacific Islanders here in California than they do in Hawaii. And so this idea of really paying attention to what's going on with Pacific Islanders here on the continent is really important, because oftentimes they feel, a lot of people have said they're like the invisible minority. No one's talking about them or their issues. And so we really, this has been great to have this opportunity to work with Ka'ala and Kaivi and Archana,
Right.
Or Dr. McGillicuddy, right? That's right. On this project, and make the voices heard. So.
Exactly. Okay, great. So let's go ahead to our first slide. So we wanted to point out the objectives, and which the first objective is we're going to look at and identify the community's nutrition and Pacific physical activity, physical activity, and also the obesity challenges that are in the community. And Ka'ala did such a nice job of bringing that to light for you all to see. So we're going to go into that as well, and then we'll go a little bit more in depth. Then we're also going to look at and understand the health disparities for Pacific Islanders. We did that in the previous lecture somewhat. I pointed out some of them, but I'll give you some more numbers in that related to that on the health disparities. And we'll also familiarize the audience, that's you, on Pacific Islander Native Hawaiian dietary intakes, maybe some childhood obesity, we're looking at childhood obesity issues and the needs that surround that population. So.
And then the last part, so a lot of my work is focused on the political economy of health, so I'm very much interested in the social determinants of health in the cultural context in which islanders and any of our populations are able to access health care or access the resources that they need in order to be healthy, however we define that. So our fourth objective is to look at some of the social determinants of health. And then the last piece will characterize some of the interventions of the populations that we've been working in. So Archana will talk a little bit about, again, the Pili project, and I'll talk about some of the work that I've been doing with Ka'ala and Kaivi, collecting oral histories of Pacific Islander communities who have built up their population and worked towards improving their health here in California. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the efforts that they've been working on.
And just ask questions if you have any questions as we're going along, and I will ask you questions as well. I'll try not to. Got it.
Yeah. So Pacific Islanders, a lot, you guys have been hearing since, was it last week? And then even today,
Yeah,
it
and
was
the week
last week,
before,
and
yeah.
the week before, about the various health problems that Pacific Islanders face, Native Hawaiians in particular, having high rates of obesity, high rates of cancer, high rates of cardiovascular disease, high rates of incarceration, alcoholism, all these kind of social issues. And what happens is a lot of times people say, oh, Pacific Islanders have all these problems. And what we want to do today, and I think Ka'ala did a great start on this, is to make sure that we understand that they are not those problems. When we look at the larger context in which these issues take place, we need to understand how those problems come about, right? If you look back, as Ka'ala said, you look back at some of the first encounters that Cook had with islanders, if you look back at a lot of the reports that the explorers wrote up, they all talk about how beautiful, how graceful, how healthy, how muscular Pacific Islanders are, how active they were, right? So we shouldn't mix up what's happening now with some kind of natural state of being. Pacific Islanders are not naturally unhealthy. We are all naturally healthy people, right? And how do we get back to that goal?
Yeah, so I think that's definitely, that's a really, really wonderful point. And that's what this slide kind of points out as well, is when we're looking at, we look at the physical activity parts, and I talked about it during that first lecture as well, that they're healthful, they're healthy, they're strong, they're all those graceful, all those wonderful adjectives that Dr. McMillan just mentioned. So as you can see, even in their cooking, the way they cooked was also helpful. Not just the foods that they ate, but they mostly just did baking, and there was hardly any oil used in their food. There wasn't any frying in their foods. So I think that's another thing. There's boiling, baking, steaming. Those are the types of cooking methods that are used. So when you think about the percent energy from fat in their diet, do you think it's high or is it low in the traditional diet? Low, exactly. So it's virtually lower than what you would, between 15 to 10% energy from fat, which is the recommended guideline is up to 20%. So I think that that's something really important to keep in mind.
Well, which slide is mine? Which slide is mine? So some of the early work that Archana and I did, Dr. McGillicuddy, sorry. And I did looking at the local community and sort of their ideas of what it meant to be healthy. And when they thought about the issue of health, a lot of times people, as you would expect, talked about issues of weight, diet, and exercise. Like if I were to ask you guys, describe for me a healthy person. Think of your friend. Are they healthy? A friend of yours. Can you think of a friend of yours that's healthy? Mm-hmm. So describe to me what that person does.
She works out a lot, and she eats pretty much healthy, like vegetables, stuff.
Vegetables. Is she a vegetarian or?
No.
Okay. Right. So exercise and eating a balanced diet.
Yeah.
You guys have learned about balanced diets. Right? So, it's sort of expected. This is what people are going to say. They exercise, they have a balanced weight. But for Pacific Islanders, you really have to sort of question what weight means. So thinking about issues of BMI. Dr. McGillicuddy told me you guys read an article or you talked about the issue of BMI for Pacific Islanders. If you think about larger bones, taller people, just more heavy set. Does that necessarily mean that they're unhealthy? Right? And you can think of that as practitioners even. If you're calling on Pacific Islanders, do you want to just automatically assume that just because they're big people that they're unhealthy? Right? And then if you do that, what kind of position does that put them in? That they're going to have to defend themselves against some kind of characterization of what they are not. So really kind of taking apart this issue of size. So A lot of people have talked about, one woman said, I see some very big Hawaiians, but they're still doing the things they want to do. So for them, the size is malleable, it's fluid. You need to think about how people are behaving and acting. Are they able to do the things that they need to do? Their idea of health also has to do with the way they carry themselves. And for example, the woman that we were talking to, this idea of the emotion of being a Hawaiian, she was recalling a woman who was really big, but when she danced the hula, there was something about her that she was able to pull out the story and allow the audience to feel that emotion. And when you dance hula, a lot of hulas are about Hawaiian history, about the ancestors, about the land. And so when you dance hula, you're bringing up all this knowledge about the people who came before you. And so to be healthy for her also was being able to bring that emotion out and to share it with everyone around you. So when you talk about this question of health, healthy, unhealthy Pacific Islanders, you're not just talking about weight, diet, and exercise. You're talking about a whole host of other cultural values that are embodied in their history, in the land, as Ka'ala gave you the Hawaiian origin story, right? The kalo is their younger sibling, and you're supposed to care for your younger sibling, and in turn that will care for you by giving you the food, right, to eat. It will grow and flourish. And so all of these things are being brought out through their body and their way they carry themselves.
We're going to talk about the pressing problem. You're going to see some numbers.
Oh, sorry.
So we're going to see some numbers, and we're going to, so just bear with me that the next few slides are just going to have quite a bit of, there's going to be text and some numbers, okay? So we'll go ahead and start. This is some of the things that we found out from our study that we did, and it's published in the Hawaiian Medical Journal as well.
Okay, so when we spoke to a lot of the community members, they said that they really know that these are the issues, the heart disease, the cancer, the obesity. They're quite well aware of what's going on. And so they too wanted to incorporate more exercise. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the complications in changing diet and exercise. But in their categories, they focused, in the qualitative interviews, they were really focusing on this issue between nutritious versus non-nutritious foods as part of the reasons for the disease rates that they have. So some of people would talk about fast food versus home-cooked meals. Right? What do you imagine are some of the issues concerning fast food and home-cooked meals? Yes?
The way it's prepared, like the shortcut, like the fattier fats, oils, compared to like actual, oil.
Right. So the fattier foods and the McDonald's and all that, the fast food, versus being at home and being able to make sure you know what ingredients are going into your meal. Being able to make sure that you have the appropriate foods at home. And a lot of times, the people that we spoke with would see this sort of as the difference, the fast food versus the home-cooked, as the difference between eating Hawaiian food and eating American food. So they very much saw that transition in their eating habits as tied to colonization, as tied to the historical and political transformations in the islands and what was available to them now. So they knew, they absolutely know what's going on. They're not unaware. And they know what they should do. But the question is, how do we start getting there?
Exactly. So let's talk about the health disparities. We've talked about this previously, but I kind of went over it with some charts, but I really wanted to show you some numbers and to look at the health disparities in Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander communities. So first want to look at the population. In the United States, and that's including Hawaii, right? That how many, the 2010 census says that there's 1.2 million Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islanders, which account for 0.4% of the population. Now, this is where some of the issues come in when we look at Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders, is that, so it's 0.4% of the population. So let's say that if we look at Cal State Fullerton, there's 37,000 students. So how many Pacific Islanders do you think there would be here? But ours is kind of a biased sample. So we do have a pretty good number of Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders. We're an Asian and Pacific Islander serving institution. But really, with that, we'd have about 37. But we have more than that. We have over 300 Pacific Islander students. But still, and then out of that, there's about 100 Native Hawaiians right now. So we're actually doing fantastic. Our school, by far none, is one of the most diverse populations in the country. And so kudos to us for that, and to California.
And can I say I'm just jealous that you guys have so many Pacific Islanders? We have like 20 at Riverside. I'm always, we're the Pacific Islanders, so you guys,
So that's really great that we're really working with the community to bring it. So, but what happens, so as Dr. McMillan said that they have 20, so what happens is when you go to publish a paper, one of the things, I think back to your epidemiology classes, what is it when you're looking at to see if the results are valid, if they're representative, what will they look at when they look at the study? What's the number that you're going to see? The number of people, what is that called? Sample, the sample size. So that's where sometimes it becomes an issue when you are looking at, because when you go for funding, when you look at data, when you show that these are the disparities, they want to see the numbers. Without the numbers, you're not going to find the statistical significance. But in all fairness, they are considered special populations, so there are areas that are studying it. But it's something to be aware of, that when you have to look at the numbers, and you can't just go by, oh, it's a small population, so we won't be able to publish the study. There's more to it than that. So I think that it's important to keep that in mind, that it's a growing population, but it's still a small population, and that's where some of the issues come up. So we have that. We have 1.2 million of the population, and out of those 1.2 Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islanders, Native Hawaiians, and as a group, they've experienced 2.4% of growth. So we've had a growth, and from the 2000 census to 2010, we've had a considerable amount of growth, nearly, I'd say, 40% of growth for Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders. So it is a growing population. And it's the third overall race that's growing, and that's behind Asians and Hispanics in the United States. So that's something important to remember. And out of those Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander groups, Native Hawaiians are the largest Pacific Islander group in terms of numbers in the U.S., followed by Samoan and Guamanian or Chamorro. Okay? So that gives you an idea. We talked about those three different groups, but you know that which ones are the largest comprising in terms of population.
Why is this group, why is this growth?
Definitely, of course, in the continental United States, it's immigration. We have immigration. But there is efforts for growth for Native Hawaiian. You can probably speak to that quite a bit about on island, about being Hawaiian, recognizing that you're from the Hawaiian line. So there is emphasis and pride and honor to belong to that particular group. So there is that also. So.
I'm sorry, one more question. So the area that Apollo was talking about, that is just like sandbars or the islands or global warming, are natives leaving those areas to come to the United States, or are they staying put and pleading for
The continental United States.
to the continental United States? Are
What's
they
happening in the Micronesian islands? Yes, they are migrating. Remember, they're migrants.
Okay.
Immigrants are coming from Polynesia. The migrants are coming, and they're coming, believe it or not, the largest community, 10,000 plus, is in Springdale, Arkansas.
You're kidding me.
The dirtiest industry is what? Chicken plucking. So Tyson Farms hired a Marshallese who said, hey, got a good job, got health insurance for the first time, come. So overnight, half of our Yes, so now Arkansas, Washington State, and Missouri are the largest Micronesian community. Who would have thought? But yes, if Auntie is successful, Uncle successful, the family comes. So it is migration for the Marshallese and the migrant, but it's immigration as, the job opportunity, the healthcare system. And there lies a major conflict with what existed on island, which was zero in terms of preventive health care. We now have it here.
But I would guess that in Arkansas, you have a lot more unhealthy, well, you don't have access to the cultural foods that
Yes.
they're used to, that you might even be able to get on a coastal area here in Costa Mesa that you wouldn't be able to get in Arkansas.
Such as fish, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah, it's a major problem.
Interesting.
So, yeah, so they are definitely, yes, of course, migration is definitely a factor that increases the percent of population here in the continental United States. So I wanted to go ahead and talk about, the next two slides also talk about the disparities, the health disparities faced by Native Hawaiians. So Native Hawaiians are over 5 times as likely to experience diabetes. This is diabetes between the ages of 19 and 35. So that's, if you can imagine, 5 times compared to non-Hawaiians. And then also Native Hawaiians are the highest rate of deaths due to cancer. And Ka'ala mentioned this as well for Native Hawaiian women, that they're due to cancer compared to any other ethnic group in Hawaii. And now we're finding that this is happening here in the continental United States as well. So, and they have the second highest rate in the country. So when we look at the diabetes, cancer, diseases that are related, the underlying cause, obesity. I mean, definitely obesity, unhealthful eating, lack of physical activity. But, so just something to keep in mind in terms of looking at disparities. So we talked about diabetes, cancer, and then we also talked about, those are the major ones, but look at this. They report higher adjusted rates of hypertension, high blood pressure, diabetes, asthma, arthritis. So you can see that they're frequently report poorer health compared to most other ethnic groups. And then most of these differences they found were actually related to overweight and obesity, but not really to smoking. So that's really interesting that you can see that where should we put our public health efforts? As you out there as practitioners, public health practitioners, to understand and to talk about healthful eating, physical activity, that I think that points out, and we talked about culturally appropriate ways to do this, which one example was looking at hula, and Ka'al talked about maybe they'd be more interested in surfing, maybe they'd be more interested in water sports. So those are the kinds of takeaways that you want to have through some of what we're talking about, in addition to the social context that we discussed. So we've talked about that, and also the CDC, according to the CDC, Native